the second day of the Allyship Journey. Today we will talk about the first way the system perpetuates itself, through stories, myths, and narratives. Joseph Campbell, in his book The Power of the Myth, explained how myths give us life models. For example, it is proven that in the cultures that have a female at the origin of the creation, males actually take more part in the caretaking. So myths are not disconnected from the reality, they really inspire it. This is the core of Harari's provocative thesis in his book Sapiens. It is our collected fictions that define us as a species and lead us to cooperate. If we collectively decide to alter the myths, we can alter population. At the moment, most of the stories and myths present in our society back up the current domination system and justify the superiority of the dominant collective. Think about the sacrifice of his beloved son by Abraham in monotheist religions, embodying obedience to authority above love and empathy. Alternative myths or narratives have been destroyed or looked down upon as primitive or foolish, as most indigenous stories, for example. And tales favoring the dominant have been creating in its place, such as Disney's Pocahontas. John Smith wrote about the beautiful daughter of a powerful native leader rescued him and an English adventurer from being executed by her father. This narrative of Pocahontas turning her back on her own people and allying with the English, thereby finding common ground between the two cultures, has endured for centuries. This narrative is very flattering to the dominant culture and conveys the myth of the good Indian, the one who admires the white man, admires Christianity, marries him rather than one of her own. Religions also have a key role in shaping the different archetypes, as they did with the original sinner Eva or the pure Mary in the Bible. Mythology tells us what is acceptable. The rape of the Sapiens at the creation event of Rome, Zeus raping most goddesses and humans show us that rape is a collateral damage of the domination system. Grand paintings of Europeans looting the world or greatest heroes being male white conquerors and imperialists such as Napoleon or Alexander the Great show us that conquering land and even at a terrible human cost is worth remembering. That is what is called centering, the idea that the whole reality is explained through the dominant's perspective and its view of the world. All the stories that do not involve the dominant or portray him in a positive light disappear. Who heard of the Dahomey Amazons in Benin, a powerful all-female military regiment? And who heard of La Kahina, a Berber queen and a religious and military leader who led indigenous resistance to the Muslim conquest of the Maghreb in the 7th century? Who heard of Queen Nanny, a Jamaican national hero, leader of the Maroons in the 18th century? And who knows Rigoberta Menchú, a current indigenous activist and leader from Guatemala? We need to decolonize our knowledge, to rediscover myths and heroes or heroines from other cultures and other value systems. Another iconic example of the centering is the celebration of Columbus Day on the 12th of October, Spain national holiday, a blank holiday in the US to celebrate the discovery of the Americas, when most native people consider this date as the start of cultural genocide. Thanksgiving Day is often portrayed as beginning with a friendly feast attended by American settlers and Native Americans, ignoring the centuries of genocide, racism, and discrimination that followed. Another example of centering is that most of the world, Christian or not, is counting the date from the birth of Jesus Christ. Some cultures have their own calendar, Muslims, Orthodox, Chinese, but the common acknowledged measure of time is based on a Judeo-Christian date. In France or in Spain, many public celebrations still reenact the victory of Christians against Muslims. This centered narrative is reinforced by the news we watch, the movies we see, the books we read. Recently, a lesbian French author said she would only read books written by women from now on. It triggered an uproar. But what have we been reading, watching, listening to so far? The cultural industry is extremely biased towards the dominance narrative because the dominant has money to finance it. The rest of the narrative is invisible, so it doesn't exist. The narrative of colonization from the native perspective, or slavery from the African perspective, or crusades from the Muslim perspective. The story of the world from the point of view of women, trans people, indigenous people, introverts, people on the autism spectrum is rarely making the news. A lot of critics now complain of the whitewashing of non-white heroes in Hollywood movies. The fact that even when the movie industry is starting to tell the stories of non-white people, they hire white actors to represent them. For example, Cleopatra, the famed ancient Egyptian ruler, is to be played by Israeli actress Gal Gadot, best known for her Hollywood depictions of Wonder Woman. In the past, white actors used blackface to portray black characters, such as Laurence Olivier playing the Black Moor Othello in 1965. Religious art and films have been whitewashing the Bible for centuries. Although Jesus, Moses, and other biblical heroes were born in the Middle East, they're usually depicted in the paintings, movies, and other media as being white, often with blue eyes, such as Michelangelo's David. Schools also teach a whitewashed version of history, one in which white cowboys are the heroes, natives are the villains, and slavery is a minor blemish rather than a massive permanent scar. The main movers and shakers are rarely not white, and remember George Washington and Thomas Jefferson as icons of achievement and nobility, while failing to mention that both owned slaves. Most of the news favor a whitewashed version of events that emphasize white protesters and law enforcers with little focus on the black communities driving the story and most affected by it. Whitewashing in the news is also evident in the underreporting of unarmed black men injured and killed by white police, and in the way Breonna Taylor's murder was swept under the proverbial rug until the Black Lives Matter protests finally made it trending news. Rock and roll has long been defined by white talent taking credit for black art. The genre itself is based on blues music, a black art form, yet it still took white artists like Elvis Presley or the Rolling Stones to popularize music that originated in black performers by whitewashing for white consumptions. This is what is called cultural appropriation, when the dominant adopts the fashion, iconography, trends, or styles from another culture and benefits from it, financially or aesthetically. And kids learn to see white as good and beautiful from a very young age. Would it be with the iconic blonde, blue-eyed, sculpted to European-descended perfection Barbie, or fairy tales like Cinderella or Goldilocks? In her TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, the Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie explains how she started reading stories about snow and apples as being the norm, even if she had never seen any. In our ads, we do not see women wearing hijab or people from Asian descent. In our cities, the stadiums in the public squares, the names of the streets show us that only the dominant narrative deserves recognition. Only 2% of the French streets are named after women. And only now do we see that some statues are taken down and some cities try to balance their streets' names. As the famous phrase says, you can't be what you can't see. UN Women says that only 23% of the movies have a female protagonist at the moment. And most of them still follow what is called the male gaze, portrayed from a male heterosexual perspective, where female are mostly objects of desire. You can perform what is called the Bechdel test. It's a simple, very simple test where you need to have two female characters in the movie who have a name and who actually talk to each other about something else than a man. Guess what? Half of the movies don't pass the test. When we belong to non-dominant collectives, getting to know our role in history is actually key to our emancipation. We need to know about all the leaders, warriors, queens, sailors, pirates, adventurers, artists, writers that are absent from our narratives. We need to know their struggle and feel our imagination with them. As for reflection time, let's think about the stories in your country about gender, race, sexual orientation, about other ethnic groups, other religions, other countries, other social class. What do they say? What are the stories that are untold, invisible? And how do you try to diversify the stories you watch, you read, the songs you listen to? Let us know.